So you've just built your very first gaming rig like we did here, but now what do? Windows doesn't just come on that drive and everything doesn't get installed. You need to do it. I'm going to show you how to flash the system to the very latest BIOS. Afterwards, we're going to install Windows 11. Then we're going to install all of the drivers, do some basic configuration, and afterwards, I'm going to show you a little on how to optimize your video performance so that you can get the best performance out of your system. So without wasting any more time, let's get started. So before we can actually flash the BIOS, configure the BIOS, install Windows and the drivers, we need two thumb drives. One for Windows so that we can install Windows off of it, and the second one for the drivers and for the BIOS. They can't be the same thumb drive because the BIOS can't read the Windows partition. So you will need a FAT32 thumb drive. So for this one, I'll have a link up above so that you can see how to create the Windows thumb drive. And then for this one, I'll show you how to prepare it real quick. So we're just going to insert the thumb drive that we're going to use for drivers. And you may have stuff on it, you may not, but just make sure it's something you know you want to delete. So then we'll come into File Explorer, and then we'll go to this PC, and then you'll find that thumb drive. Just make sure it's the thumb drive you want to erase, and then right click on that thumb drive and click Format. After you click Format, you want to make sure the file system shows FAT32, not exFAT or NTFS, FAT32. Then also make sure it's set to quick format, because if not, it's going to take a long time to format it. And then you can name it whatever you like. I'll name this one My Drivers and click Start. All right, and again, it's warning you here, it's going to format, it's going to erase that thumb drive. So make sure you don't have anything you need on it. Then click OK. This is only going to take a few seconds. And we're done there, and we'll click Close. So now that we've prepared the thumb drive, let's go ahead and download the latest BIOS and all of the drivers and everything that we need. So we'll go to the motherboard manufacturer's support site. I'm using the ASRock B650M Pro RS motherboard, and on that site I go to Support, then I go to BIOS. Okay, so I'm not sure what BIOS version it's on right now, but it's important to update the BIOS because you can see right over here from the very first BIOS all the way up to the last, right up here, all the different updates that they've applied. Most of the updates are going to give you AGESA updates, but then there are many that are going to support different types of RAM, newer CPUs, improved memory compatibility. So it's incredibly important to flash to the latest BIOS, if not before you install Windows, afterwards. That way you get all the compatibility, the performance, and all the updates so that your system can run tip top. So I'm going to download the latest, and you'll notice here, nothing is telling me that I need to install this one before I go to this one, before I go to this one. Make sure to read all these notes. You don't want to update to a BIOS that isn't supported yet. So the very first one is 1.18, the latest is 3.16. We'll see in a minute what BIOS version our motherboard is on right now. Then another thing over here, just some notifications about the BIOS update. So we'll click here for global, and it's downloading it up here. Now we'll scroll up and we'll go to downloads. We're going to download all of the drivers and applications necessary for our board. First, make sure you select your version of Windows, and then here I'm going to download the audio driver. There is no Bluetooth on this particular board, but if yours has it, go ahead and download it. The NPU driver. I'm going to skip the chipset because we're going to download that from a separate website. The LAN drivers. I'm not going to have any RAID, so I'll skip that. Now I'm going to download the floppy drivers in case it does require that for the installation. And I'm going to skip the AMD graphics drivers because we're not going to be using those. And again, we don't have the Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, so I'm going to skip that. I'm going to download the ASRock motherboard utility. I'm going to skip all of these and the Phantom Gaming 2.5 gigabit LAN utility. I'll download the latest beta Polychrome RGB software. All right, that's all downloading over here. This is an AMD chipset motherboard, the B650 Pro RS. Now, I stated that I wasn't going to download these chipset because these are older. So we'll come over here to AMD.com, and then we'll go to Resources and Support, and then we'll click Drivers under Radeon Graphics and AMD chipset. Scrolling down a tiny bit here, under Search or Browse Drivers and Support by Product, under Browse Products, we'll select Chipset, and then scroll down a tiny bit. This is an AM5 socket motherboard, so we'll click there, and then we'll look for B650. We'll click here and click Submit. And then we'll select our version of Windows, And then typically it's best to download the latest. So I'll click download here. Then we'll come over to intel.com for our graphics drivers. And then down here under quick links, I'll select download center. Then I'll select graphics. And then over here on the left-hand side under graphics, I'll select Intel Arc dedicated graphics family. And then I'll download the latest and greatest Intel Arc and Iris Xe graphics windows. Download here. This particular card does not have an RGB controller, so we'll skip that. Then we'll go to the Wavelink website for the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth adapter that we purchased separately. I'll download that driver and I'll click Windows here. Next, we'll go to the Viper VP4300 M.2 drives support site. We'll scroll down a tiny bit, and then here we'll see under software the toolbox, downloading it there. Lastly, for the RAM, the RGB controller or the RGB software, and we'll scroll down. And then under control and sync your RGB, we'll click download now, which will take us to Signal RGB, and we'll click download here. And it's downloading it there. So once that's done downloading, we'll click on the folder here, show in folder. Okay, these are all of the drivers minus the media creation toolkit, which we downloaded from the Microsoft site and my downloads folder. So I'm gonna select them all, unselect those. I'm gonna click Control C for copy. And then we'll go back to this PC and we'll go to my drivers and paste it right here. This might take a second. And actually seeing this, we're going to download one more thing. We'll go to 7zip.com and we'll download the latest version of the 64-bit software, and I'll copy that over as well. We use 7zip because it's a lot better than Windows' built-in compression and extraction software for zips, RARs, and a bunch of other archival software. You'll also notice that I'm using another PC to prepare these thumb drives and do all the downloading and everything, because all those components we just purchased, they don't come with Windows already on a thumb drive, and they also don't bring all of the drivers on a thumb drive. So you will require another PC, be it a friend's PC, family member, or a neighbor. You only need it for a little bit. All right, perfect. Now we're almost ready to go to the other PC. First off, you'll notice these files here. It looks like a folder with a zipper on it. Those are zip files. Those are compressed files. If you went inside one of them, you're going to see a bunch of files typically. It's best not to run files inside of a zip file. It's best to extract them. So for example, the BIOS, we cannot flash the BIOS inside of a zip file. So what I'll do, because of 7zip, I'll right click on it, show more, 7zip, and extract to. So it's extracting that BIOS file into this folder here. And I'm just gonna go ahead and rename it just in case because of that .rom at the end, so there won't be any issue. Just like that. One other one, that's the BIOS, and in case we need the RAID floppy drivers, we'll right click on floppy and show more, and then extract to floppy. And then just to make sure that it's all here, perfect. And let's see if there's anything else. We'll have to extract those on the other PC once we have Windows installed and everything. But now we're ready to take the thumb drives over to the new PC. So before we turn it on, we're going to insert the BIOS thumb drive that also has the drivers as well. I love the fact that it has the USB ports right on the side here. So we're gonna go ahead, turn it on for the first time as well. Hopefully it'll start. We do see some lighting up there, so we know there's power going to the board, so we don't have to freak out about that. We just don't know about the rest of the components. So buttons right over here. Now, when I turn it on, I'm gonna start tapping on the delete key. That's typically the key to enter the BIOS. So let's go. All right, success. So far at least. So we're in the BIOS. Now that we entered the BIOS, we can see right up here that it says we're on BIOS 3.06, which isn't incredibly old. So from 3.06, we can see they've added support for the Ryzen 9000 series, CPU performance optimized. Then they've added some TDP updates to support those processors. Then Adjessa updates to support newer processors. Support for the 9800X3D processor. So they've added quite a bit since version 3.0. 3.06 going all the way to 3.16. So then here we'll click Tool, and we don't need to worry about setting the BIOS up just yet. We need to flash it first. Under Tool, we'll select Instant Flash. This is warning us about BitLocker and everything, but since we don't have an operating system on the drive yet, we don't have to worry about that. So we'll click Yes. Instantly, it found that BIOS that we extracted, so perfect. Click Update, and then yes, we want to update. This will take about a minute or two. Don't freak out. During the BIOS flashing process, your PC will restart a few times. It's perfectly normal. When it's done updating, it will boot you back into the BIOS. Notice we're on BIOS 3.16 now, and it's showing our RAM here. It's actually showing that incorrectly, but that's okay. We'll fix that now. We'll go to the exit menu, and then we'll select Load UEFI BIOS Defaults, and then yes. Doing that, we're bringing everything that's in the latest BIOS out. Then the other thing we want to do is come down here, bottom right hand corner. This is the incorrect date. So we'll click here and we'll set the correct date. So for me, it's January 22nd and it is 7:51 p.m. So 19 over here and 52. Then we'll click apply. So that's incredibly important because of Windows. So we'll click OK here. Now I'm setting it to the defaults of the system I have, the PC that I built. If you have different components, you may need to set up things differently. You can comment down below with your components and I'll help you as much as possible. Then next we'll go into OC Tweaker. Gaming mode, you'll want to set to enabled. Performance preset, I'll leave this as it is for now. DRAM frequency, this one is kind of important. So we have DDR5 6000 megahertz RAM. It's only showing up as 4800 because that is the JEDEC standard. But we don't set it here. This is so that we can overclock it. What we want to do is under DRAM profile configuration, and then under DRAM profile setting, click on that. And then here we can set either XMP, if our memory has an XMP profile, or Expo. Now, this is all RAM dependent. Your RAM may have Expo profiles or XMP profiles. This particular RAM has XMP. So we'll select XMP1, which brings us up to 6000 megahertz or 6 gigahertz. Then we'll come back over here. And now that we've set that, we don't need to play with this. See how it set it automatically. And you don't want to play with the voltages. So come down here to see if there's anything else we need to change. Okay, next we'll go under advanced and then CPU configuration. We want to make sure that we have AMD FTPM switch set to AMD CPU FTM for Windows 11. Then we can back out of here. PCI configuration. Because we're using an Intel Arc card, we want to make sure we have above 4G encoding enabled, as well as resize bar support. The card is not going to work incredibly great unless we have that enabled. Coming back over here. Onboard device configuration. Since we're not using onboard WAN or Bluetooth, just going to disable that here. This particular board didn't have Wi-Fi or Bluetooth built in, so that's why we had to buy the external card. But there is a version that does bring it. Okay, come back over here. Storage configuration. We're not using any SATA drives, but I'll leave this to AHCI. We're using an NVMe M.2 SSD, so we'll click under NVMe configuration. And here we can see that Viper VP4300L. So we'll go back over here. Trusted computing. We want to make sure that security devices support is set to enable for Windows 11, as well as physical presence spec version set to 1.3. So we'll go back over here. If you want to mess with the CBS, PBS, or the overclocking, do that. That's far beyond the scope of this video. And if you want to change any of these UEFI settings, you could do that here. And we're going to skip that and go to Tool. We've already messed in Tool with the Instant Flash. HW monitor is a great one. It tells us the temperature of everything in the system. I like my system to be nice and cool. 44.5 degrees is actually incredibly cool. My house right now is 65 degrees. So coming down here under CPU fan setting, I'm going to change that because I don't mind it being a tiny bit louder. You can hear it right now. Kind of quiet, so I'm going to go to performance. So we don't really hear anything now. Under CPU fan 2 WP switch, that's this rear fan, this rear case fan plugged right into the motherboard. I'm going to set that to DC because it's a 3-pin fan instead of the PWM fan, which is a 4-pin fan. bump that up to performance mode. There are no other fans inside of this system, but what I'm going to do is more than likely they're going to be PWM. I can always change it later, but I'm going to set it to PWM and performance. I'm going to do that for all the fan headers now. And now if you want to auto tune your fans to get the best performance, you can run Fantastic and fan tuning as well, but that's kind of outside of the scope of this video. Coming under security, I don't want to set any passwords for the BIOS. And then under boot, over here is our Windows 11 thumb drive. I already swapped the drive out from the driver's thumb drive to the Windows installer. And then the CSM, we don't need compatibility support. We don't want to enable Pixie. That is for installing Windows through the network. And launch storage Opera policy, we can leave that to do not launch. And the rest we can leave as default, and then exit. And then we want to do save changes and exit. Here are all the changes we've made, quite a few. And then once we're done, click yes. Your system will restart. All right, so here is that issue that I was talking about earlier. So we do need that drive with the RAID drivers on it. So we'll click browse and my drivers and floppy, and we'll go to RAID and click OK here. Then we'll uncheck this, and then we'll see AMD RAID controller. So we'll click on that, then click install. And then languages and settings, change it to whatever language you'd like, time and currency as well, and click next. Keyboard or input method, whatever you'd prefer here. Next. And then I would like to install Windows 11 or repair, but we're installing it. I agree to everything will be deleted, including files, apps, and everything on that M.2 drive that we have in there. It's empty, so it's okay. And click next. I'm not going to be using a product key just yet. I'll insert that later on. We don't need it for the install. Then I'll click I don't have a product key. Now, when we buy a product key, it's going to be either Pro or Home N or whichever version. If we already know which version we'd like, we select it here. I'm going to be using 11 Pro. Then I click next. Read through all this incredibly important information, then click accept. Here it finds my two drives, my Windows 11 installer and my driver's thumb drive. This unallocated space is the M.2 SSD. So I'm going to select that. Then I'm going to click next. All right, ready to install. Certain apps and features may have additional requirements. And then we click install here. This will only take a few minutes. Is this the right country or region? Yes. And keyboard layout. Add a second. Skip. Let's connect you to a network. I don't want to do that right now, so that's okay. So what we'll do is hit Shift F10. And then from here, we'll click inside of the DOS window to select it. And we'll type UBI, or out of box experience, / no space here, bypass NRO, and then press enter. Now that was to skip having to connect to the network or the internet to install Windows 11. This way it lets us skip that. All right, now coming back over here, click yes, and we're going to have to redo this again and skip. All right, now, well, we can't connect to a network, so we click here. Now we have I don't have internet, and enter your name. And next. No password, so we'll click next again. And you can change all of this. I just leave it as default. All right, so we are in Windows. Perfect. So now I'm going to open up File Explorer and click on my drivers, the driver's thumb drive we made. I'm going to select everything, right click and copy. And then we're going to go to this PC, the C drive, and we're going to create on the root a new folder, and we're going to name it drivers. And then I'm going to paste everything from that thumb drive into this folder. And now the first thing we're going to install is the AMD chipset. Should always be the first thing you install when you install Windows, the chipset of the motherboard. That lays the foundation for all of the drivers. So double click here and click yes over here. And I don't like UAC. You may like clicking yes for everything. So I'm going to click start. And I'm going to type UAC, then change user account control, and then slide this all the way down, click OK, and yes. This makes Windows a little less secure, but this makes it a little bit better for me to show you this. We'll install everything here, so click Install. And then here, instead of clicking Restart, we're going to click Close, and then we're going to right-click on the Start button, shut down or restart, and restart. Now, the reason I say to restart from Windows rather than from the program, many times in different applications and programs, when you click restart, it might still be doing things in the background. So you've actually ruined the install, and then you have to go back in and fix things. So I like to close it, make sure everything's done. Once it's done, then I restart. But always restart when it asks you to, because it makes changes in the registry and in the software, some changes that can't be made when Windows is running in regular mode. Now that we're back in Windows, let's go back into File Explorer and this PC, C drive, and in the drivers where we were before. And then now, typically I'll install other things, but I want to install 7-zip first, and we'll install in the default folder, and we'll click Close. Now that we're done with that, the next one we want to install is we want to stay within the motherboard first and then go out to other components. We'll extract the AMD NPU, 7-zip, and okay, and then come over here and install. So I'll come out of there and I'll delete this. Now we want to install the LAN driver. I extracted that. Double click here. Next, and then install. And even though I've skipped on a few things, I want to show you by right-clicking on the Start button and Device Manager. So right now you're going to notice things like this with the little bang over here, things like this, unknown devices. When you don't have drivers installed, and there would have been more if I would have shown you before the chipset install, this is what it looks like when you're missing drivers. All right, we'll come back to this in a little bit, and then we'll finish this Ethernet driver install, come back out, and now we'll install, let's delete this. Now we'll install audio, so let's extract that real quick. Realtek Audio, and scroll down till Setup. And next. Okay, like we've done before, no, I'll restart computer later, finish, and then we'll come back over here and shut down our sign out and restart. All right, and again, File Explorer, this PC, C, drivers. So now these are the extras, so we don't need this right now. Let's go ahead and install the Wi-Fi driver. So right click on here and we'll go to show more properties, WinZip, and extract. All right, and then Windows, this one here. We'll install Wi-Fi first, 64-bit, and next, I agree, install. Okay, and going back here, we'll go to Bluetooth and install that real quick. And next, I accept, next, and we'll do complete, and next, and finish. All right, and we'll back out of here. Now we'll install the graphics drivers. Now you may notice the screen flicker a little bit during this part. Begin installation. Make sure to read through all this incredibly important information and click I agree, I accept, and customize. The driver support assistant is that way you could check to see if there's updates. You can leave that enabled or uncheck it. I'll leave that there. The Intel graphics software and the Intel graphics drivers and the Intel computing improvement program, I don't leave that enabled. And execute a clean install. Even though it's a clean install of Windows, it's always best to do a clean install. So start here. So that is going to be the very last driver. The drivers are the most important. Now what we're going to install are the applications that the motherboard comes with. Those should always be done after you install the drivers. The drivers control everything here. See, here it says we need to restart, but this is still installing. All right, so we'll uncheck this, we'll click finish, and now we'll go ahead, right click, shut down or sign out, and restart. All right, now that we're back in Windows, File Explorer, let's go ahead, unplug these. They don't need to be in the system anymore. This PC, C, drivers. Now let's go ahead and install the motherboard utility. Double click on there. and next. I accept, next, 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 and install. No, I'll restart later. And let's go ahead and restart real quick. All right, File Explorer. And let's install the Phantom Gaming. These are all extras we don't really need. So if you don't want them, you don't need them. You don't have to have them. Phantom Gaming. This is to prioritize your bandwidth for gaming. And you could play with this later on if you'd like. Let me go ahead and close that out. And now we'll do the Polychrome RGB. Now to install it. Next, 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 all the way through and install. And I will restart computer later. And the usual. All right, that was a quick startup. Close that out and the usual. Get rid of this. Now, before I install Signal, let's go ahead and check the ASRock RGB software. All right, perfect. So let's see here. We can see DRAM. Right now it's on Rainbow. Let's go ahead and change it to static. Perfect. So we don't need to install the other software. That makes me completely happy. So switching it back to, let's do breathing. I like breathing. And it's doing not only the RAM, but it's also doing these fans, the RAM, and the motherboard. So that's beautiful. All right, so we can close that out. All right, so it looks like we're done here. Now, if I come over here, right click on the start button and go into Device Manager, the only bang we have here is Microsoft Display Adapter. That would be for the CPU graphics. Now let's see real quick if we can disable those. Let's go into BIOS real quick. All right, and in the BIOS, we'll go under Advanced and AMD CBS, and then we'll go under MBIO Common Options, and scrolling down a bit, we'll go under GFX Configuration, and then DGPU Only Mode. So we'll select here and click Disabled, and then over here under iGPU Configuration, iGPU Disabled. So now we're not utilizing the onboard GPU. So F10 to save and exit, and yes. Now that we're done here, we have everything installed. What I like to do is at the very end, we'll click start and we'll type in update. Then we'll go to check for updates. I like to enable get the latest updates. And then if we go down to advanced options, I like to receive updates for other Microsoft products as well. Enable that. Now, if I go back, I'll do check for updates. Now, we all know that Windows has a bunch of issues, a ton of issues. Windows updates will allow Microsoft to fix those issues on your machine. A clean install Windows update is the best friend because that way, not only does it update Windows, it actually sometimes checks for newer and updated software, which chances are it may not find any, but it's there. So again, do Windows updates. I highly recommend it. All right, so it's got a few here, all mainly Windows, and then some Intel and some display drivers and all that good stuff. And since I've already set to download them immediately, it's already downloading them, so we don't need to download and install. It does that for us. After downloading the updates and restarting, now we're here. Let's finish setting up your PC, continue. And we can play with this if we'd like. I'll go ahead and skip it. And whether you do or don't have a Microsoft account, you can go ahead and click back here. Now we'll right click on the start button and Device Manager. All the drivers are installed and actually not coming into Intel drivers and support. Check for new drivers. Wireless Bluetooth driver, so another one. Okay, so we're downloading that real quick and install. Yes, I do actually. Next. Accept and next. And we'll do complete and install. And finish. All right, coming out of here. All right, now that we're back in Windows, everything's installed. All of the drivers have been installed. We don't have any issues here. All the Windows updates are installed. Now let's do a little optimization of Windows. So if we come down here and we'll right click on this little eye here for Intel and open the Intel graphics software. At home here, we can see we have resizable bar checked, meaning resizable bar is enabled. This GPU supports resizable feature and is currently making use of it. So it works. Perfect. And coming back to home, and then here we can see our processor. Under graphics, frame synchronization, application choice, we can either leave it there, select any which one of the settings we'd like there. FPS limiter, I prefer to leave that off. I like to let it do its own thing. Low latency mode, I've actually never used it before, so I'm going to select on plus boost. Let me know if you've used it, what your results are. Image sharpening, I'll go ahead and leave that off. And adaptive tessellation, I'm not sure on that one just yet. I haven't played with it. I'll leave it off for now. Display, under here we can see display scaling. We'd like that. Scaling method maintains display scaling. I prefer that. Variable refresh rate, incredibly important. I'd like to leave that enabled. And then here we can play with the colors, the color depth, and here we get some information on our card and our display. And then variable refresh rate mode, full screen. I prefer it that way. And then performance, here we get some of the metrics. That's all set, and we didn't change much, but we changed a little bit. Close that out, then come under here, right click on the background, then display settings. If your monitor supports HDR, we'll enable that here. That might change a little bit of my recording, so I won't enable that here. So we scroll down and we go to advanced display. Now, unfortunately, on every single monitor, when you install Windows and the drivers, no matter how fast, you're going to be defaulted at 60. I like to do the full refresh rate. So we'll click here and we'll enable 120 Hertz. It's supposed to be 120, but it says it's not. And then keep changes. So that is 120. Now we've optimized with variable refresh rate and the refresh rate of 120 Hertz. So what we've gone over in this video, we've flashed the BIOS to the very latest version available on ASRock's site. Then after we flashed it, we went ahead and changed all the settings so that we can get the most out of our system. Now remember, this is my system. Your system might be slightly different. If you do have any questions though, please ask. I always respond. Then after that, we installed Windows, the very latest version of Windows, which again, if you've never downloaded, don't know how to prepare the drive, I linked it earlier and I'll link it down in the description as well on how to create that drive. Then we've also installed all the drivers and all the Windows updates. And then I've shown you at the end how to optimize your system for better performance, at least video wise. So I hope I've helped you on this part. So on my previous video, we went ahead and built the system from the ground up. And then in this video, we took that system we built in that previous video and configured it perfectly. So now I left it in your hands that you can install any game you want, any application. I particularly am going to install DaVinci next and do some testing there as well. DaVinci is what I use to edit this very video, and then we're going to play some games on it as well. So we're going to see just how well this system performs, or maybe how bad it performs. We'll find out in the next video. This is Iggy with ThisBytesForYou out. See you guys.